Hello everybody and welcome to my A to C Stitch With Me number 6. This is the Frosty Forest series by Cottage Needlework. We have finished part 1 and 2, and it's the first and second part we did in that consecutive order. We're now on part 8, which is the third one we're doing, and it's called the Snowy Reindeers. It's going to look like this when it's done. Those reindeers are really looking cute. So as you can see, there is one reindeer looking to the right and one looking straight forward. So last time we started the one looking to the right, and I said that I think I am going to do French knots this time. But the thing is that the reindeer looking straight forward also has French knots. So my thinking is I will do at least the head of that reindeer. So I can do the French knots all in one go. So hopefully we can get around to that today. I am really struggling with my breathing. It's my allergies that are really bad. So we will just see how this goes, and if it's if my voice gets worse, I think I will wait with the French knots. So yeah, let's just go ahead, start stitching, and see where we get to. So going to zoom you in nice and close. There. And then we need more of the reindeer color, which is 420, which is like a light golden, not light, medium golden brown color. Add a little length cut off from the other time I stitched. So yeah, I might not be talking too much today. So I hope you don't mind it. Most likely being a little bit more quieter than it usually is. But most of you have said that you don't mind if it gets quiet from time to time. It just feels even more realistic by having me in the room with you, so that's good. And usually my voice gets back to normal after a little while. It's just that I recently woke up and my allergy medicine hasn't kicked in yet, so I will often have like this raspy voice in the morning, just because my airways are so cramped up that it's hard for the ear to get through like it's supposed to. So yeah, if you hear me breathing hard, sounding like I have run a marathon, it's just my allergies. I have what is called allergic asthma, and that is because my allergies are so bad when I'm not, that I can get asthma attacks from time to time, and constantly have a reduced amount of breathing going on. Like that's very normal. Me not breathing the way I'm supposed to. Okay, I'm gonna take a sip of water. That usually helps a little bit because I want to do those French knots. So, if you're wondering why I'm taking the vaccines for two of my worst allergies, you know why. It's because I can't talk without sounding like I have been running a marathon. And I just need to try and take deep breaths instead of getting those shorter ones you usually have after running. So, French knots. A lot of people don't like them. So what I will do is that I will start with a half stitch here, and then I will go up here. Let's see, I want to go down above usually, so I want to start here so I can go down like in the middle right here, because that's where the French knot's supposed to be. Holding the floss tight and wrapping it around the needle so the floss goes under the needle and against me. And I think I'm going to do that twice. Maybe that will be big enough of a French knot. I don't think we need a third time. But I usually, personal preference, like my French knots to stand out so they kind of look like they have, that there actually is a good eye there, not just like a teeny tiny thing of nothing. And look at that, a perfect French knot at the first try. Usually when I have been doing this on camera, you know it has been not behaving. So it's actually nice for you to see that this is usually how I do my French knots. It's no more issues fiddling than what you just saw. So the big thing is to remember how many times you wrap the needle around. And as I showed on the Racoon Cabin, I think that it is marked with doing French knots or something on that one also. There I'm actually doing one size for the eye. Like the more you wrap the floss around the needle depends on the size you get on the French knot. So I did one size for the eye of the raccoon. The eyes are one size. I think that's twice around. And I think for the nose, I wanted that one to stand a little bit more out, giving a little bit more dimension. So I wrapped it around 3 times. I know I wrapped it around a little bit more, 1 time more, just to give it that dimension, as I said. And it worked out perfectly. So that's also one thing can know with French knots, is that depending on how many times you wrap around depends on, as I said, the size you get. And you can really use that to your advantage when stitching. And that's one of the things I really like with French knots, is that you, like with the raccoon, you can easily have 1 dimensions for the eye because the French knots are one size. And then the nose is another dimension because it has more wrapping around the needle. So it sticks out a little bit more. Which is really, really nice. And that's why I'm not often a fan of too much changing out French knots for beads, but that's also a thing a lot of people do. They will use petite beads instead for the eyes and nose instead of French knots. So that is a possibility. If I were doing like one of the Thomas Kincaid's Disney kits, I know the flowers often has a lot of French knots, and those usually is supposed to be the same size. Like in that case, there is maybe a chance that I would changing it out to beads instead. But usually I will just do the French knots. And if it's a little bit of a difference when it comes to like flowers, it's not that big of a deal. Because okay, I'm going to try and come up in the middle. No. How do I want to do this? Yeah. Train of thought first. Flowers isn't necessarily always 100% the same size, so it wouldn't be too big of an issue. And now, the thing is, the French knot is supposed to be in the middle of this stitch. Like the French knot is marked off to be this stitch. But I know that the French knot will not fill up totally that stitch, so that's why I stitched over it. So I think maybe I will try and pierce down the middle. So what I will do is I will find my little needle case that I got, and I have these needles, pin needles. They are really sharp at the edge. There was a little bit of fuss on there because I'm using these to frog because I have a little bit of hold on this pearl-ish thing, and since is so sharp at the end, it's really easy to use it to frog with. So what I think I'm going to do is I will make a hole down in the middle where I'm supposed to go down, because I don't want to change the needle making the French knots. I did that once before, and I noticed that suddenly, even though I wrapped it around the same amount of times, the French knot got a tiny bit smaller. And I think it's just because the needle was a tiny bit smaller that that happened. And there's also going to be the same on this side. So I'm going to poke it. I'm just wiggling it around to just make a tiny bit of a hole that I can actually see. So let's hope that worked. So 1, 2, I'm holding it tight. As again, I'm wrapping around the needle so the floss go under the needle and against me. And then I usually like to go upwards when I'm doing a French knot. I'm holding this fairly tight until I reach the eye of the needle, because when I reach the eye of the needle, it needs a little bit more place to go through the floss that is wrapped around the needle. So I'm losing it a little bit now, and now I'm tightening it again and trying to hold it tight as long as I can and go down. And as you can see, perfect French knot this time also. And because I did 2 perfect French knots, the third one will now look iffy, and I will have a weird looking reindeer. You never know, it might happen. So I will go up here. And again, wrapping around so the floss go under the needle against me. That's one of the most important things, because often, the reason I say this over and over, that's the one thing I will mess up. But I know this, so I always tell this to myself, that the floss is supposed to go under the needle and against me. And then I will go up and down the middle of that stitch, holding tight as long as I can. And of course this got wonky because I couldn't hold it tight enough long enough. Nope. Now it's a big mess. I called that one. So just need to thread my needle again. And what I basically did was that I tried to get a little bit more of a tightening on the French knot. So I'm pushing it. I did it from the front where I pulled the floss and I kind of nudged the French knot downwards, because I know that's where it's loose because I didn't hold it tight enough long enough. So I'm pushing down and tightening. And as you can see, even though it looked a little bit wonky to begin with, it now looks okay. So then I can go and do finishing this stitch, and I think I'm going to pin stitch under. There's supposed to be one more of this brown stitch here, so we'll just finish that stitch up there. So with my fiddling, this stitch got a little bit of like that. Okay. Now I'm happy. So if you see, if the French knot doesn't turn out perfect at once, there is a few things you can do to try and get it to look better, and this time that happened. So yeah, it's looking good. So I think I want to continue stitching on this reindeer, just because there's a lot of pin stitches that I want to stitch over and see that they look okay when I remember that I still did that. So I'm actually going to cut this length in half, just because I know it will be pretty long for those stitches on the reindeer. Make it so I have more lengths where I can use the loop method. So I'm gonna do half a pin stitch under here because I want to jump over to the left side. And it's also because I don't want to trail down on this side. So instead, further down, I'm gonna jump over again and trail up and do the rest of the stitches on the right side that way. Because I like better to trail upwards than downwards when it comes to how my stitches look. Nope. What did I do wrong here? Let's see. 2, 1, 2. But this is fun. Stitching the reindeers. And usually when I get around this point in a pattern, this is when I will push for a finish. But I don't tend to do that when I'm doing this series because I don't always have the time to film that much to push for a finish. So okay, so I'm going to park this floss right here. And then I'm going to go over on this reindeer. That's because I want to finish up this reindeer now because I need to do more white before I can do more of this color. So instead of starting a whole new length of white, having like a whole bunch of flosses parked, you know that I can finish that white if I just finish the brown on this reindeer, so why not? And this is usually how I will stitch. Like I often will jump back and forth between like two motifs. I think maybe especially why I am very jumpy between the motifs right now is the fact that I have done a lot of project that has big blocks of colors. So now I'm kind of jumping around just to get that a little bit more fiddly kind of stitching. Because I tend to have periods where I really want to stitch confetti and then I really want to stitch blocks of colors, and I switch between those two very often. So but these are starting to look good. Those French knots make such a big difference. Like in my mind, they're totally worth it. My husband is coming home, so I'm sorry if you can hear him. He has a tendency to always have to have sound around him or be talking or singing himself. So we're already starting to close into where I should stop. And I should, because the rest of what I want to do is going to take at least 10 more minutes, I'm guessing, depending on how fast I'm stitching. I say I should stop, that doesn't mean I'm going to do it. So, but hopefully you guys don't mind it being a little bit longer episode. Usually try to keep it. In the beginning, my goal was 30 minutes, but usually I always ends up going